Thanks for your company on Saturday Agenda. With me now, Alan Tudge and Matt Thistlethwaite. Thank you for your time today, gentlemen. First, you, Alan Tudge, on this announcement from the United States that they have authorised another 1,500 troops to go to Iraq in a training capacity. Is this the mission creep that experts have been warning about?
I think this reflects the growing problem in Iraq and in Syria, dealing with ISIS, which is this terrible death cult and a barbaric organisation, killing people, raping people, slaughtering people, beheading people. And obviously the United States is taking the lead role there in trying to degrade, disrupt their efforts, and Australia is also playing its part.
Matt Thistlethwaite, should Australia be open to sending more troops as well?
Well, David, Labor's been very clear in our support for the government on this issue, but we've made it conditional on certain circumstances being met, namely that our troops are only involved in action within Iraq, that we don't support formed up combat troops working on the ground, and once the Iraqi military has the capability and capacity to defend their citizens, Australia should withdraw. I don't see any reason for the American announcement to change any of those conditions, and that's the basis upon which Labor's offered its support for this operation.
Alan Tudge, at this time, when you say, you point out that our forces are helping to fight a barbarous organisation, a death cult in Iraq, is it really the right time to be cutting defence pay in real terms?
Well, we're increasing defence expenditure. We inherited defence expenditure at the lowest level since 1938, which after Labor's cuts,
but defence pay specifically,
several billions dollars into the defence budget, raised to 1.8% of GDP, on track to get to our promised commitment of 2% of GDP, and that's what counts. We've got significant contributions we're making around the world. We are determined to ensure that we've got a very strong defence force, and we're on track to get to 2% of GDP.
Matt Thistlethwaite, we've heard the arguments about why the ADF should be paid more. How do you propose that the government should actually intervene in the tribunal's decision?
Well, David, Bill Shorten's written to the Prime Minister outlining Labor's position, and that is that the government should be supporting an increase above the 1.5% that's been offered. As you point out, we've got Australians going to be involved in the action in Iraq, putting themselves into harm's way, but having their real incomes cut by this government. I've got a lot of Defence Force personnel that live in my electorate, and they're really angry about this decision. And it's not just this decision, it's also the government making life tougher for them by proposing a GP co-payment, by increasing the cost of petrol, and they're all run cars, they have to fill up their petrol. The prospect, a lot of them are families, the prospect of having the childcare rebate means tested, it's just making it harder for the people that defend our nation, and it's a kick in the guts for those that are going off to fight for us in Iraq.
Yeah, sure, we've heard those arguments, but I will come back to you, Alan, but just staying with you, Matt, we've heard those arguments. Is Labor arguing then that the tribunal shouldn't make its decision independent of government, although it's the government that makes the submissions? Why not just have the wages of ADF personnel set by the government, centralised wage fixing for ADF? That way any actual decision that's made would have to be worn by the government of the day.
Well, we support the current structure in terms of how decisions are made by the independent tribunal, but the fact is the government should have never made this submission in the first place. They should have never advocated a cut to the real incomes of Australian Defence Force personnel, and Labor's been very clear from the outset. Our Defence Force personnel deserve their real incomes to keep pace with the cost of living, and that's been the great deficiency here.
Alan Tudge.
This is great hypocrisy from Matt Thistlethwaite and the Labor Party. You look back at what the Labor Party offered in 2012 and in 2013, and they were below inflation wage increases. So we're not going to be lectured to by the Labor Party on this front. As well as that, the Labor Party cut about
$25 billion, though, were they?
About $25 billion from the defence budget. pulling our defence expenditure back to the lowest levels since 1938. So that's what we've had to deal with. So we've put money back into defence. We've actually engaged a further 1,500 troops. And yes, we are still providing a salary increase to our Defence Force personnel, but not as generous as we could offer had we had money in the bank. And of course, we don't have money in the bank. In fact, we've got a giant debt courtesy of the economic vandalism of the former Labor government. And despite all that, we're still offering a pay increase, and indeed those troops who are going abroad, including to Iraq right now, they get additional salary and additional tax-free benefits on top of that.
Look, David, can I just
respond to that? Matt Thistlethwaite, should we, look, just a couple of minutes left. I did want to touch on Ebola.
Yeah.
Should Australia increase its commitment? We've committed to $20 million for a private contractor to set up this field hospital in Sierra Leone. But should the Navy or the military be involved in any way, Matt Thistlethwaite?
Well, our AUSMAT teams, our Australian medical assistance teams, are trained and have the expertise and capability to perform these roles, and they've proven that in places such as the Philippines in the wake of Typhoon Haiyan, the tsunamis that have affected the Asia-Pacific region. We've demonstrated...
So should the government send them?
...capacity and capability. Well, Labor said that the government should consider sending our AUSMAT teams because they have the capacity, they have the capability. But I think this decision and the government dragging its heels on this issue, and they've been exposed today in the Sydney Morning Herald. The European Union indicated a couple of weeks ago that if Australians were involved in action against Ebola in West Africa, they could guarantee the safety and that they would be evacuated to a first-class medical facility. So they've been caught out lying to the Australian public about the excuse on this.
But that statement from the EU stated only within available resources. There was a bit of a caveat there that wasn't satisfactory for the government.
And the United States and the UK are setting up field hospitals in West Africa and staffing them and providing them with a first-class capability and providing, where it's required, medical evacuation assistance as required. So this excuse that the government's had about not having the capacity to guarantee the safety of Australians is a poor excuse, and it doesn't reflect Australian values of helping out in the international community.
Alan Tudge.
Matt, I'm sorry that you're trying to politicise this issue, a very, very serious issue. We've got three priorities. First of all, ensuring that our domestic response at Australia is secure. Second, ensuring that we've got strike teams available to deal with any regional response. And thirdly, contributing to the international effort in West Africa. We're actually one of the larger contributors to the international effort in West Africa in terms of donations already provided to the World Health Organisation and to the United Nations. Now that we have a secure agreement with the British in terms of providing security for Australian people to be in West Africa, we've signed a contract with an Australian company to provide a 100-bed hospital there to be able to treat affected victims. So we've had a very significant contribution. We haven't rushed into it, but most importantly, we've protected Australians, we're prepared for the region, and we're making a very significant international contribution.
Alan Tudge, other countries have also used military resources like naval ships to transport medical supplies to the region. Should the government consider that sort of action on top of what we've already delivered?
Well, other countries have also engaged companies to deliver logistical support, hospitals on the ground, and that's exactly what we've done. The United States, for example, has done that. The United Kingdom has done that. Some other countries have done that. So we've taken an appropriate response using an organisation which is world-class, an Australian company which is world-class, has experience around the world, has experience in West Africa, and they're able to get on with the job very quickly. Okay. And we should be very proud of them, frankly.
Alan Tudge, Matt Thistlethwaite, we're out of time. Thanks very much for your company today on Saturday Agenda. And thanks for your company at home. That's all we've got time for. We'll see you next week.